I am harnessed in with just a tether, and I'm dangling on the side of this cliff, filming them above me. And it's a really cool low-angle shot. But, as I was going down to get the shot, I dropped the camera in 4 feet of snow. So I have to pull it out, and then the guys are coming. And so I'm quickly trying to clean the lens. So then I pull out the GoPro, and I'm trying to film with the GoPro to at least get the shot.
I'm Graham Flanagan, Chief Video Correspondent for Business Insider. I'm the creator and showrunner of Boot Camp, which goes inside military and law enforcement training programs. I'm here with Jake Gabbard, senior producer for Boot Camp. You've worked on the show since what, like 2021?
Yeah, it's been almost 4 years, yeah.
We're here to talk about Jake's new piece. It's a feature-length project that goes inside the U.S. Army's Mountain Warfare School in Jericho, Vermont. And it's a feature film. It's the third feature-length thing we've done for Business Insider for Boot Camp. And it's got a really cool title, too, Gods of the Hills. So I want to say this before we continue talking about this film, that if you have not watched it yet, watch it first, because we're going to get into it and go behind the scenes and get into the nitty-gritty of what you're seeing. So spoilers ahead. Watch the video. You won't be sorry, and then pick up with us after. But Jake, congratulations on the piece.
Thank you.
It's awesome. This was a big undertaking. Tell us a little bit about the story. Give us like the elevator pitch, and then we'll talk about how you made it.
Yeah, so I've been pushing this story for about 3 years now. I first reached out to them when I first joined the team, and back then, we were still focusing on kind of the basic training stories and just seeing people on obstacle courses and meeting these newly enlisted soldiers. But, I personally really like the outdoors a lot, and I'm like, this is the kind of story I want to tell. And at first, we were trying to figure out, what's the story here, and it was a little ahead of where we were going. And then as our show evolved, like, it's time to go. And I was going to go last year and do it, and I reached out to them, and they said, there's no snow here. You don't want to come. It's just gray and gross. So I had to wait a whole year to come back, and I called them up, and they were ready to have me, and I checked before I got there, and they're like, oh, there's plenty of snow. Don't worry. There's going to be plenty of snow. So I, drove up there and spent 14 days with them from start to finish of the school, because often we will drop in on trainings. We don't have the opportunity to really see as they arrive, see the same people leave, and everything in between. So this was just a great opportunity to just really see a full training and document it.
So tell me, what are they doing at the Army Mountain Warfare School? What is the training? What is it for?
Well, they are doing the same thing, essentially, that they have done since 1983 when the school opened. They are training soldiers and, honestly, service members from across the branches. There were Air Force people there. They have international students that come in. And what they are doing is they are training basically trained military mountaineers. There's also an advanced course where they go a step further. But essentially what they are doing is they are teaching soldiers how to traverse mountains safely, survive in cold climates in the winter. But essentially their job is to teach soldiers how to escort platoons and troops through the mountains safely to get them to where the objective is. Fighting often doesn't happen in the mountains because logistically that's not the best. It's more of a defensible area. But you have to get through mountains, even as recently as like Afghanistan, a lot of mountainous regions. So these mountaineers, their job is to help escort troops on foot through these places safely. And the idea is that no one they're escorting is trained. They are the trained ones, and they're the person from their unit that can do that.
So this schoolhouse, this training area, tell me where it is located.
So it's in a town called Jericho, Vermont, and it is a tiny town, but it's out kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it's just absolutely beautiful. So
like you said before, oftentimes when we cover training programs that are like a lot longer, like Marine boot camp is 13 weeks. Some schools we go to are like an amount of months or even like 21 days, but we can't invest that time and resources to like be there for 13 weeks or whatever, or 6 months. So we'll often just like bounce around to the different companies and different stages of training and then try to like weave the story together telling with those different sort of chapters that we weave together. But in this case, like I did with Jungle School in Hawaii, sort of a similar concept where you were there for the full cycle. So how long were you there for? How long did this training cycle last? Because you're there from day one until graduation.
Yeah, so it is 14 days. And I mean, it's jam-packed. But yeah, I arrived. I think the students also arrived around 1 p.m. on a Saturday. And then graduation was 14 days later on a Friday afternoon. And as soon as graduation is over, within 10 minutes, the students were in their civilian clothes on the bus heading to the airport. The school wanted them out of there. They wanted to go home. I've never seen it cleaned up that quick. And it made it great for me because I got to go home that night too.
So was this the longest shoot you've ever done, like for one story?
Yeah, this is absolutely the longest shoot I've ever done. I've done long trips, but nothing quite like this, where I was in it the whole time. I'm checking my phone to make sure students didn't get dropped without me knowing, and I'm texting the guys at the school about what is happening that night that I'm missing, or how to prepare for the next day. So I was in it, from the time I got there to the time I left, which, was exhausting, but kind of exhilarating at the same time.
I know that they run the mountain school in the winter and in the summer. Obviously, you were there in the winter. You did this in like early February, right? So you've watched the video. If you've seen the video, the conditions are very, very difficult. Like you said, there was a ton of snow. It was very windy on top of just the terrain that you guys are dealing with. I mean, part of what they learn to do is just how to walk in the snow and walk up these steep grades, like just getting around in this. So the soldiers, the students were all learning this, but you, civilian Jake, you had to go with them every step of the way to the extent that you could. And you're also carrying a bunch of camera gear. Like, I want to know, like, first of all, like, what gear did you have for this shoot?
Camera gear wise, I had like the normal rig I usually do for boot camp, which is very mobile. I have a mirrorless camera that's just essentially a DSLR, and I put it on a monopod. It's got a little microphone on top, and that's pretty much it. I just run around with it everywhere I go. I also usually will carry some GoPros, and I had to utilize some GoPros on this shoot. I even had to utilize my iPhone a couple of times because my main camera was covered in snow or frozen. So
okay, so yeah, tell me about that, because there's multiple scenes in this where the snow is just unrelenting. So tell me about that impact on your gear during the shoot and how you sort of mitigated like full damage and failure.
One is I would check where the wind was blowing, and I would stand against the wind and point the camera with the wind. So that way the snow is not coming to the lens as best as possible.
Yeah.
Which obviously when you're out in the woods or whatever, or on a cliffside, it's hard to do. But I was trying to be like very conscious of where the snow was going to hit the camera. But then at a certain point, like on day 4 when we were filming at Castle Rock, it was a blizzard. Or the land navigation on day 6, it was a blizzard. It was whiteout conditions. There's only so much you can do. And every probably 30 seconds, there was a ½ inch of snow getting on my microphone, which is messing up the audio and just covering the camera. So I was doing what I could. And then in any moments where I wasn't using the camera, I learned this technique from the soldiers there. I think they call it happy turtle, sad turtle, where they take their helmet in the snow, and if their helmet is upside down, with the kind of the lining facing up, they call that sad turtle because it's like a turtle on its back, and that you're getting snow in your helmet, it's going to get wet, it's not good for survival. So they teach the soldiers to put their helmet, with the top going up.
Right.
So I started doing that because I had helmet as well,
right.
And I would just put my helmet on top of the camera to protect it from the snow.
But your camera survived, right? Your microphone survived.
Yeah, I mean, we've been filming boot camp for 4 years. This is the only camera I use because it's tough. It's been in airplanes, it's been in the desert, it's been in 4 feet of snow. And, I dropped this camera in the snow a lot because I was falling and tripping, and there's nothing you can do. And it held up great.
And which camera and lens?
I use the Panasonic Lumix S1H. It's smaller, it's compact, but it's a workhorse, and I love it for these boot camp stories because it's light. And we're filming for 12 hours in crazy conditions on the side of mountains. So I had to be able to carry this, or sometimes I'd have to throw it in a backpack because I was getting on a snowmobile. That's the camera I use, and then I just have a little Manfrotto monopod, and I would just throw it on there, and I think it does the job.
And did you just stick with one lens, or did you have like a series, like multiple lenses?
I did have multiple lenses. I mainly only ever used the 24 to 105 lens. That's the bread and butter for boot camp, I think. It gets a little depth of field, but also it's versatile. But then if the conditions allow, I like to throw on the 75 to 200 millimeter kind of telephoto lens. And the scene where they're doing the ice wall climbing,
Yeah.
I threw that on there, and you can tell the colors and everything are so much crisper. It just really gets some great depth of field. But often when you're running gunning and you're talking to someone 1 second about what they're eating in an MRE versus filming them rappelling down a mountain, the 24 to 105 lens is a good option because you can get a little bit of everything with that.
So that's your gear, and it's amazing that it survived these conditions. I mean, if you watch some of the footage where the wind is just blasting and the snow's coming down, not even considering what you're having to navigate on your own 2 feet to stay upright and keep the gear under control. I mean, it's just amazing that you got everything out of there in one piece, that at least that you've told me about. But what about, based on the very cold and difficult conditions, tell me about like what you were wearing, like what clothes did you bring, and then how did that evolve once like reality set in? I'm guessing, you had to kind of upgrade.
Yeah, I definitely had a certain amount of hubris when approaching this shoot. I'm super outdoorsy. I go hiking all the time, and I made that very clear to my contacts at the school. I'm like, I have hiking boots, and I bought a couple pair of long underwear, and I
Hot chilies.
Yeah, I had that. I bought a 30 pack of hand warmers, and I had like a Patagonia coat. And I show up, and actually, here's a picture of me wearing that on one of the first days. And I thought that that's what I was going to wear the whole time. And then very quickly, they confronted me and they're like, hey, this isn't going to work. You're not going to be able to film this whole school if that's all you have. And at first, I was kind of offended because no, I got this. And then I started going up hills a little bit, not mountains, just hills that were just steep, and I kept falling and it just wasn't working. So they hooked me up with the same gear that all of the soldiers get. I got the full Equix system, the extended cold weather clothing system, and I had crampons, I had trekking poles, I had balaclavas, I had the boots, the two layer boots. I had all of that. There was no way that this shoot would have happened if I was wearing my civilian things, because those clothes got soaked within 5 minutes, and then I would have gotten hypothermia and had to call it. So the military gear got me through that shoot, which was cool too, because I was playing soldier a little bit.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way on the jungle school shoot. Like, I'm like, I'm in Hawaii, and I literally was wearing like khakis and Merrells and like a polo and like a Patagonia shell, and all of that got thrown away at the end of the shoot. And you live and learn.
Yeah.
Now I've upgraded a little bit. I have more tactical wardrobe for these shoots, but you've got your gear set up. You're very mobile. It survived. They upgrade you for the clothes you really need to survive out there, which is what the soldiers have. But then there are some pictures that you have that we can show that you had to rappel down steep grades and I guess you could say rock faces, right, to get to where you needed to be. There wasn't like a staircase that you could just take around for the camera guy, right? Like, tell me a little bit about that experience. When did you have to like actually rappel? And, you had to secure your gear and just, to make sure it didn't break while you were getting from one place to the other.
It's important to reiterate, every shot you see throughout that training, I had to get. And I have filmed on some mountains before for other shows and things like that. And typically there's like a little hiking trail that takes you to a viewpoint. That's kind of what I had anticipated for this, that the people that were kind of escorting me around would take me to these viewpoints. That's not how this works. And I learned that like on day 2, that if I wanted to get the shots that I was sent here to go get and tell the story I had to do the same thing that these guys were doing, with the exception of like the ice wall. There was like a way around it. But so, yeah, I had to learn how to rappel. I had to learn how to use an ascender on the fixed ropes. And if not, like, I wouldn't have gotten the shots. So, yeah, it was after like the students would learn something, and they were kind of wrapped for the day, and they were going back to the schoolhouse and rucking back, which would take about an hour. I would stay with the instructors, and they would rig me up and teach me how to do it. And we would practice like how comfortable I was walking to the edge of these cliffs. And honestly, the first time I did it, it was freaky, because I'm kind of just dangling there like a booger, trying to like get these shots, but at the same time I'm a little afraid of heights. But then as it progressed, I was learning more and more skills, and then I got more confident. And then on like day 12, in order to get where I needed to get safely, I had to ascend up using the ascender, and then I had to go down with the rappel. And honestly, that was maybe one of my favorite moments of the whole school, was getting to rappel. That was fun. It was genuinely fun. It's a really cool feeling just to kind of slide down there really smooth. I was not doing the same stuff the soldiers were doing, but I had to do some of the skill set. I had escorts that were helping me do it safely. And I had like security ropes that the soldiers weren't using in case something happened.
I mean, you were definitely doing things that you didn't have to do on like your Air Force boot camp shoot or your Space Force shoot or some of your old food shoots that you used to do.
Yeah, I love adventure shooting. That's my favorite thing to do here, is to be out in the field and put myself in these scenarios. But sometimes there are things that kind of push you. And if I'm going to get this shot, if I'm going to tell this story, I have to get in front of the soldiers. I can't be behind them, because then it's just a video of their butts. So I have to get up, and like on day 4 when they're ascending Castle Rock and coming back down, there's a pathway for them. I can't stand in the pathway. So I had to climb up into the middle of this cliffside and find and like dig a hole that I could stand in safely and move back and forth to get all the shots I needed.
The film is like, so it's about an hour long, and it spans 14 days, but it moves at a really nice pace. So it's just like shot after shot after shot after shot, and you kind of forget or don't even realize like what's going into the shot, because you're just like watching the story. Every shot tells a story or is part of whatever scene we're watching, progressing the story along. But like, can you name like any particular shots in the piece where like the audience should know what was going into getting this shot, in terms of like where you were, position with the camera, or what you had to do to make sure you were safe or the gear was safe?
Yeah, there's one in particular that I can think of that I actually have a behind the scenes video that one of the guys shot here. I am harnessed in with just a tether, and I'm dangling on the side of this cliff, filming them above me. And it's a really cool low angle shot. But, as I was going down to get the shot, I dropped the camera in 4 feet of snow. So I have to pull it out, and then the guys are coming. And so I'm quickly trying to clean the lens. So then I pull out the GoPro, and I'm trying to film with the GoPro to at least get the shot. But there are a lot of, like on the culminating event at the Notch, there's so many shots like that also I'd have to hold my breath a lot of the time, because I was so exhausted and panting, and like I'd get there just in time, and then here they come. So I would hold my breath and try not to shake the camera, because I'm exhausted, and like I got the the tunnel vision in my eyes, but I'm like the camera knows what it's doing.
It's when you approach a story and you get the opportunity and the access to cover like a full cycle of training, it affords us the opportunity that we don't often get in those other stories, where we're kind of bouncing around, to like really get to know people. And in the context of your story, like you get characters, right, that you can like follow all the way through. When we're bouncing around like Marine boot camp or something, like we might only be at a site for a few hours covering like an obstacle course. And like within that obstacle course, it's like, okay, let's stick with this one person, hear their story, have a little like mini character arc within that little chapter, and then that's it. But in this case, like you get to meet these people on day 1. And that is one of my favorite parts of this film, is that we get to know these people and individually, and sort of get attached to them and develop like, certain feelings or opinions about them. I want to ask you about one specific one that I think many will agree is like the standout character in this piece, and that's Honeycutt. Who is Honeycutt?
So Staff Sergeant Nicholas Honeycutt, he's one of those guys, and like you mentioned, a big part of our job is finding these people, finding these characters. So day 1, they're checking in. None of them know each other, and they're going up to their barracks, and they're nervous. It's first day of school. They're nervous. I'm up there in the barracks with them, and I'm kind of filming, asking some questions, but really I'm kind of scoping out who are the people I'm going to spend the next 14 days covering for this story. Who's captivating? Who's interesting? Who do I want to follow? Because sometimes people are, a little bit quieter and don't make good characters. I'm there, and within 5 seconds in the barracks, I hear him cracking jokes about how cold it is. There's a shot, a little scene in that day one where he's joking around about being from Texas, and it gets cold there, but not as cold as it is here. And he was already talking about how cold it was.
I'm coming from El Paso. It might get cold, but it ain't this cold.
And I was like, this guy, I want to talk to more. So I just started asking him questions, and then every single day I would kind of check in with him.
He's always right here in my face.
And got to know him really well, and I just I loved getting to follow him around as he experienced it, because he was very vocal about how cold it was and how hard it was, but he had a big heart and a great guy to follow. When I got there, when I worked with the school, I said I want to be able to follow characters. So there were 3 different squads, and every single person that was placed into second squad had been asked if they were comfortable being featured in this documentary, which is great. That's a dream for me. So there were a couple of people who were special ops that I don't even think we're going by their actual names. I wasn't allowed to film them, understandably so. Everyone that was placed in second squad, they were totally comfortable being on camera. And there were many times, and we'll get to this in a little bit, with the test taking where it gets intense, and they're having moments of real stress and real worry. And I would ask, I'm like, hey, is it okay if I keep filming you? I need this for the story. I want to film this, but I also don't want to influence your time here. And Honeycutt especially was super gracious the whole time.
In schools like this, like at Jungle School, if you get accepted and you start the course, you're not guaranteed to graduate.
No.
Obviously there's always the risk of illness or injury that can get you out of the course, but along the way, in between day one and graduation, there are these critical tests where if you fail the test, even if you're only halfway through the course, they're you gotta go. So in my experience at Jungle School, it's there are all these tests in the first few days, and you're following characters around that, you're hoping they'll make it all the way through to the end, and you'll have that post-game interview hey, aren't you excited? But the reality is anybody can fail at any given time. So Honeycutt, you're with him. He's this lovable guy, very dynamic, funny. He's picked to be the squad leader. He's a staff sergeant, so very capable guy. But then they have this critical test that they say at the beginning of the video, and I love when you do that because I've watched the piece a lot, but they say the knot test is what gets people.
The knot test is about 1 weekend on the course. We see that there's generally a 15% attrition rate, and of the 15%, the vast majority are from the knot test.
So tell me what happened with Honeycutt and that knot test.
Yeah, well, first to jump into it, failure is necessary because there's a standard here. And as a civilian, as a citizen, of the U.S., I want the guys that are graduating to be ready to go. So they weren't messing around with that standard. And that's why this knot test is so crucial, because that knot test determines right in the halfway point. It determines who can carry on and finish this training and who's not safe, or who can we not put on these cliff faces. So it's really important. And you don't know who's going to do well. You can kind of have an idea, but Honeycutt was so confident the whole time I was there. He just carried himself with this confidence. But you could see it at the beginning of the scene, and I think there's a shot that we can there's a shot here where you can see Honeycutt is fiddling his fingers right here. He's got this little zip tie that he's running through his fingers, and he's noticeably nervous, and you could really just feel it. And something changed. He was not chatty that morning to me. He was in his head, and then he approaches the instructor at the front of the line, and he's just I'm as ready as I'll ever fucking be.
Yeah, he says that in a sarcastic way.
Yeah.
And it's you get a sense something's a little off.
And I feel like he's already given up. I'm going to follow him through the test and just kind of see what happens. He'll pass, and then I'll go cover some other people. Just to kind of give some context here with the knot test, they take it once. If they fail, they go to 20 minutes of retraining, and then they get another opportunity to take the test again. And if they fail that second time, then they're done, and they're kicked out of the school. And we go, and I'm noticing real quick he's not getting a lot of the knots. There are certain purposes, which they have to name the purpose of each knot.
The purpose of the butterfly coil is to prepare rope for carrying.
There are certain purposes that he's just not even saying. He's so in his head, it's not working, and then he gets that score, and he had, I think, 172 out of 240.
He was way off.
He was way off. And that was happening a lot. There were a lot of students that on that first time were getting around that range. But yeah, Honeycutt, and then he went to retraining, and, he was making jokes because you could tell he was nervous, and I think that's how he was handling it. He was training and trained next to a Sierra, who was another character that, was great to cover. And then he went back and did it again. And it was kind of a euphoric second test. He was just killing it. And I think that comes across. Like, he's just hitting all these knots, all these purposes. And I take a sigh of relief. He's got this. He's clearing it up. And then with the last 4 knots, he just completely got in his head again and just choked. And he ended up failing by 4 points. Yeah. And that's it. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. So he packed his stuff up, and within an hour was driven to the airport and was done with the school.
When you're filming Honeycutt taking the knot test, even though he was like totally cool with you filming him and like open and gracious and like you described, do you think that you being focused on him and like right up in his face, like in any way negatively impacted his performance in the knot test?
That was my fear. Definitely was my fear. So there was a moment in retraining when we were in that little side room where the instructor doing the retraining asked me, he's like, "Hey, will you not film him during the second test?" And I understood the request, but I'm like, I kind of have to. I need to see it. And then Honeycutt jumped in, and he's like, "No, Jake's got it." And he stuck up for me, and he's like, "I'm bad at these knots. That's not Jake's problem. Jake, you can film whatever."
There's a moment where you follow him. He like goes into the weight room to sort of decompress, and he's just a different person than he was with all of his swagger and good humor. And he still has a sense of humor to an extent, but I mean, I wanted to ask you what that's like for you, because he left Texas to go on this trip, and everybody knows, and everybody in his unit knows he's going to mountain school, and it's like, you got to come back, having graduated, and you don't want to go back having been kicked out on, at the knot test. Like, what was it like for you to be with him one-on-one? Clearly he's upset, but you're doing your job to show what happened, how it all played out. And you're obviously invested in it. You've gotten to know him. And what's that like for you in terms of like balancing what you're feeling with like doing your job, and how did that work?
It was kind of devastating. I was imagining every, night when I'd go back to the hotel and I was writing kind of the script and the outline, I was imagining him at the graduation and, seeing the change from him on day 1 to day 14. That was in my head. I was already writing it. And, I knew he was going to graduate. So all of a sudden when that instructor's like, that's 236 out of 240, unfortunately that's not enough. The look on Honeycutt's face in that scene where you can just see his stomach just drops. Mine did too. I'm sitting there holding the camera, and like my stomach dropped. I'm like, oh no. Like, 1, I don't want to say goodbye to him because I've been hanging out with him every day. But 2, like, I wanted to see him succeed so bad, and I just really understood how brutal these schools can be, and like it's important. But also, I was there to do a job, and I had to tell a story, so I made sure I continued filming, and I gave him a couple of minutes to gather himself, and then I kind of started hunting around to see where he was, and I caught him turning his gear in, and he was still kind of shaken up from it, so I didn't push him too hard. And then he went to kind of where he liked to spend a lot of time, which was the gym, and he was in there just kind of blowing off some steam. And I was like, "Hey, do you mind if I just chat with you a little bit?" And he was, "Sure." And then he was feeling much better already.
He says he's going to go home and cook a steak or a chicken thigh and drink a beer just for you. Have you checked in with Honeycutt since you filmed? Did he drink that beer?
I spoke to him yesterday, actually, just to kind of follow up and see how he's been doing. I assume he drank the beer. I didn't get that answer from him. I had a beer for him that night. I remember I went to a brewery and had one just for him. But yeah, no, he's doing great. He said that he's been taking what he was able to learn in that first week, and he brought it back to his unit in Fort Bliss and has been teaching them some of the knots and stuff. And I think he plans on coming back and doing the summer course where it's not cold.
There's a moment later in the piece, well after the knot test, where they're being tested on like lowering techniques and the rope systems that you have to employ successfully to make those safe. And there's an instance where a student named Grueling is being tested and timed on getting this rope system ready.
I'm fucking up.
2 minutes.
What am I doing wrong here?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time. Stop what you're doing. So your mule isn't cinched down either, so you can see that there would be a lot of play in that. All right, back it up.
I want to protest it, don't I?
Okay.
So we were told yesterday by Sergeant George that we would have those anchors tied in prior to. We wouldn't be timed on tying those in. So I think that if I had a little bit more time, I wouldn't have freaked out as much. Because I messed up on the mule, or not on the mule, but tying that initial prusik and lost time, and then as you were counting down, rushed through. According to Sergeant George yesterday during the study hall, he told everybody those would be pre-tied for us. We wouldn't be timed on them.
So you think that this thing,
The green, yes,
is
correct.
all that fucking cost you?
Master not. I think that the time on that, I mean, like, I wouldn't have fucked my way through it.
Because I literally heard you going, I don't know what I'm doing.
I did say that because I was frustrated trying to get that initial prusik knot tied.
The 12 minutes is designed
I understand
for that. So whether you were told that or not is kind of irregardless.
that. Okay,
Is this just falling apart or what?
a little bit.
It's okay, man. Well, pack it up.
All right, son. It's like I'm out.
Tell me a little bit about that moment, what that was like. I mean, you could cut the tension with a knife. It's had to be awkward.
It was extremely awkward. Yeah, and the story about that is pretty crazy in itself. I was filming our loadout episode, which is our sister series where we do like a gear thing. I was filming it that morning, and then I had to race to where they were doing that test, and they had just dropped me off in a Susby. They just dropped me off at the bottom of this hill, and all the other soldiers are just kind of hanging out, eating MREs, and I'm like, hey, where's the test happening? And they say, oh, it's up there. So I'm sprinting with all my gear because I'm like, I have to cover this. I have to see this because, you know, if there's tests where people are getting sent home, I have to see it. And I get up there, and there's only like 6 students taking the test. And one of them happened to be Grueling, who I had talked to a lot. He's one of my main characters. And honestly, after Honeycutt, I saw him being kind of a main character. So I wanted to, you know, like really feature him. And I get up there and I start filming, and he is freaking out. And you hear him just cussing under his breath. And I'm like, oh, I have to film this, but I feel horrible. So I did stand further back than I did for the knot test. I'm like, I don't want to mess up his chances. He's clearly struggling here. And actually, there's a shot from the knot test where I filmed Dan. And he said, not right now, bro.
Ooh.
Oh no, not this time, brother.
So I could tell he doesn't want to be filmed in that. I totally get it because it'll get in his head. But I needed this moment. So I'm filming it, and the time ran out, and the instructors came over, and it was just nowhere near done. He knew that. And, you know, he kind of, I think, did a Hail Mary. He didn't want to get kicked out of the school, understandably. He was so close to being done. That was their last day of the test taking, and after that, it was just smooth sailing, just having fun, essentially. And so he went. They have the option at the school that you can protest dismissal.
And they bring another instructor over there to like hear the case.
Well, that's part of the story.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
So there's one instructor that was reviewing Grueling's work, and he's like, hey, this isn't it, pack it up. And then the other instructor saw that I was filming it, and he goes, Jake, just take a step aside, and asked me to step aside. So I did, and got out of the way, and he went in there because I could tell that he was kind of concerned about the confrontation that was happening. So then he gets into it. He handled it really well, but of course I, immediately turned back and keep filming it. And then, Grueling brought up a point that they were told that, certain knots would be tied that they wouldn't have to waste their time on. He was the only student that had failed the test. Every other student was fine tying those knots. I think he was just trying to do what he had to do to stay in the school and get his ram's head. But, as soon as he got kicked out, I ran over and was like, hey, what happened? And he's fine. He understood. He's like, yeah, I tried protesting it. I don't think it's going to work. Going home.
That's a wild scene. Like, you think, I felt watching it like, we're out of the woods, right? Like, everybody's good. But then you have this moment. It's just like, whoa, it's not over yet. Like, and there's this tension and this back and forth, and it was like a visceral moment. I was just like, it's so awkward. Like, I'm getting kind of like butterflies just thinking about it. But that is such a cool scene. Another part of this is the fact that there were only in the squad you were covering 2 women.
Yeah. In the whole school, there were only 2 women.
In the whole school, not even there were not even in the other squads that you didn't follow.
Correct.
So there were 2 women. You follow them. One of them is a lieutenant, Lieutenant Eiler, right? And the other one is Norton. I forget her rank.
She's a sergeant.
Sergeant Norton. Okay. So you're following the 2 of them, and you're with Eiler one night in their camping section, right? And you're filming her, just kind of doing a lighthearted check-in interview, and everything seems fine. And then, in your awesome editing, like things change, and then the voiceover comes in, and it's like,
shortly after we filmed with her, Eiler was seen curled up on the ground.
what happened?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what was going through my mind, because I literally had filmed her, and she was just checking in, just kind of like, checking because they were about to go do the ice wall. And then I had turned around because they were cooking the breakfasts over there by the different stoves. I was filming a little bit of that. And then, just kind of spidey senses, I look over my shoulder, and there's kind of a group of people gathering around a person on the ground. So I immediately whip my camera around and film it, and I realized, that's Eiler. I just talked to her. And she was fine, seemingly fine when I talked to her. So, I go over and film it, and pretty quickly they escorted her to the SUSV, and she was in the back. There's like a back area that they keep heated for emergencies and for
Right.
medical things. So I'm kind of asking around. I'm like, what was going on? And nobody really knew. And then one of the instructors came over and kind of filled me in. But essentially, the full story there is that they took her into the SUSV and, warmed her up, and then they brought her back outside of the SUSV to see if she could regulate her own body temperature. And from what I was told, she was having a hard time maintaining her body temperature on her own. She was just kind of chilled to the core and just exhausted, because again, they are rucking. This is a physical school. It's hard to tell because they're covered in all that gear and it's snowy. And she, I think her body was just kind of done. They think it was dehydrated. So yeah,
Wow.
she wasn't able to continue on with the course, and the amount of time that she was going to need medically to recover, she was going to miss too much of the school to be able to continue training. So she was dismissed, and once she felt better, taken to the airport.
Wow. Have you checked in?
I did. I checked in with her. She's okay. She's back at Walter Reed, and she's doing fine, and made a full recovery.
So when Eiler left the course, the only woman left in the course was Sergeant Norton, right? And I love this part of the story. And, you ask her, what's it like being the only woman left? And she sort of says that, and you can tell she's, disappointed that Eiler isn't there anymore, because they were, the only 2 women in the course, and they sort of had that bond. And, she said that Eiler seemed to be a little bit more comfortable around this type of a group because she's a lieutenant, has that leadership experience. After Eiler left, what were your observations about Norton in the context of that dynamic of her being the only woman left?
Actually, it was really interesting. So Norton is interesting in the fact that she was one of the oldest people there. She was 38, but she had some of the least experience. She enlisted at 34, which is pretty wild. So she's still kind of figuring this all out, and she was very clear about that, and would talk to the other students. She's like, I'm new to this. There's a lot of lingo I don't understand.
Right.
Whereas Eiler has been around for a long time, she has done a lot of training. She's been stationed places and is very used to this kind of setup. So I think that Norton, although she was one of the older students, was really kind of learning a lot from Eiler and connecting over that. So I loved getting to watch the 2 of them, and then eventually watch Norton cross the finish line.
Watching this video, there's all these shocking moments where people get cut and tension and all these things, and scary moments like with Lieutenant Eiler collapsing. But one thing that sort of permeates this documentary is humor. It's a high pressure environment. They want to pass. They want to succeed. They don't want to come back with their tail between their legs, saying, "Yeah, I failed this test and got sent home early." But there's always this humor from day one all the way through the end. What can you say about that, and especially in the context of such a high pressure, serious environment?
I think that humor comes when the stakes are real. There is real pressure from these soldiers to like not die. They are dangling, and they're taught this. Like even like on day 4 when they're going up the Castle Hill and the rappelling, especially if they slip from that rappel, I mean the snow is kind of cushiony, so they might have been okay, but there's a chance they could be really harmed. And then as the school goes on, it's guaranteed if you fall, you're dead. So there is like a very real stakes to this, but at the same time, it's fun. Like they all chose to be here. They want to learn mountain training. So I think that there's kind of this dichotomy between the stakes and just enjoying the adventure of it. That kind of, you see these moments of humor where, I mean, these are just a bunch of guys who are just out in the snow, like kids playing in the snow all day. And that's essentially what the vibe was for most of these days. There were other days that were a little bit more stressful, but they're just having fun. The ranks were quickly kind of put to the side. It's just a good group of people too. They were just kind of fun.
Well, that's one of my favorite and funniest moments is when they like hit that obstacle that they weren't expecting, and they're like, send the major up there, he's expendable. And they start making cracks about, oh, your fonts in your PowerPoint presentation weren't up to snuff. I just love that. That's one of my favorite parts of working on this show, is that humor, that camaraderie, you know, busting each other's chops to sort of cut the tension. Because, like, they obviously have to take it seriously all the time, but they can't, like, take themselves too seriously. And I love seeing that. I see it in most of the shoots that I do, this just sort of underlying, like, sense of humor that, like, makes it fun, because it has to be, right?
Yeah.
There's, like, a culminating exercise called the mountain walk. It was all building to this, but then the weather got so bad that they didn't do it, right? And I've been at schools where stuff like this happens, you know, like you've got this big training event, but then for one reason or another it just gets canceled. In this case, it was like the culminating event of the school, a smuggler's notch. Like, that just sounds really cool. Describe like the level of disappointment that the students might have had to not have that experience, and for you to not have your like big main event culminating exercise. Or were they relieved that they didn't have to do it?
Well, it depends on who you ask, I think. I think that, you know, I was pretty relieved. And the reason for that is I was exhausted already. I showed up there and my body was just beat. And I show up, and those first shots in that scene were the first things I filmed. Because I got there before anyone was there. I pull up into the parking lot at the Notch, and no one's there. So I film a little bit, and then time goes on, and I'm starting to wonder, like, did they cancel this and just not tell me? And then I'm stuck because the roads are bad out there. I'm like, what am I going to do? This is like getting a little dangerous. And I'm kind of like getting a little excited. I'm like, maybe they canceled it. And maybe like they'll just do something back at the school, and I'll just film that and we'll go from there. And then all of a sudden the school bus shows up, and I'm like, oh, all right, this is happening. This is for real. And, you know, I have shots of them all walking up to the base of the, you know, this big gully they're going to go up, and the snow is just sideways and blinding them. Yeah. And honestly, I was pumped. I was like, this is going to look so cool. Yeah. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but as long as I can get up to the top, I'll be okay. And like they were coming up with plans on how to make sure I got, you know, I was going to go behind one squad to get like the underneath of them and then get there before my squad. They had second squad go last, so I'd be able to get in front of them to get all of them coming up. So we were all ready to go. And then we went in and did the avalanche transceivers. And that is where shit got real. That's
what I wanted to ask you. There's a scene in the piece where you turn the camera on yourself, because avalanches are a real concern, especially in this area, and especially on a day like this with weather like this, where at this point they think they're still going to do it. And they come up to you and they're like, yeah, Jake, you're going to need one of these devices also, where this avalanche transceiver that essentially will tell people where you are if you get buried in an avalanche. Yeah, that's like one of those moments in the movies where they're like, you know, you're probably wondering how I ended up here. And that's one of those, I'm like, well, I got to do this. I'm here. This is the last thing, as the guy says in the video, this is the last thing we got to do. And, you know, we've been here 2 weeks. So I was pumped. But then when that came out, I'm like, oh, this is real. And a little like behind the scenes thing, there was an avalanche there in that gully in 2018. And I think
it was the advanced course, like 4 students and 2 instructors got swept up in it, including one of the instructors I filmed. It's a very real thing. And then on the news every day in like Colorado, there were avalanches happening. People were dying in avalanches, and they put this on me, and I'm seeing this wind, and I'm seeing the snow come in. I'm like, this is getting really real. But I trust these guys. If there's anybody I'm going to be with during an avalanche, I honestly feel pretty safe with this school.
Yeah.
So I just kind of, put my faith in them that it'd be okay. So then I go back out and I'm filming all my second squad guys getting ready to go, and they say, "Hey, we just heard the bad news. We're not doing it." I'm like, "What?" I was kind of bummed, kind of relieved. They were all pretty disappointed.
Yeah.
Because the hard stuff is over. This is just physical stuff now for them, and
Yeah.
that's what they do.
And now, like, how people they like bust each other's chops and stuff. Like, now they're going to be people that graduate from mountain school, and they're going to be like, "Oh, how was your mountain walk?" And they're going to be like, "Oh, we didn't do it. The weather was too bad." And they're going to be like, "Oh, well, then you didn't really graduate."
Yeah. Yeah, but again, like, that culminating event is not pass fail. It's for fun. It's really just to show them what they can do with their new skills. And it was going to be really strenuous. Yeah, that argument can be made. But the instructors were telling me off camera that was one of the first times in the 10 years they've been there that the walk's been canceled. There's only like a couple of times it's been canceled ever. And that's how serious it was. And they wanted me to go film it because the visuals, and that's how dangerous it was. And you can see the footage that one of the instructors sent me from his phone. Like, there were slabs, and that you could, like, it looked like it could have gotten really bad. So I'm so thankful that they called it, and they still did some really cool stuff in just a much safer way.
After this whole process, two weeks in this environment, doing everything that we've talked about that you had to do to make it happen, get the shots, tell the story, what, like, physical, emotional, spiritual impacts did it have on you, your body, your soul, your mind?
Honestly, there were pretty profound impacts. I felt really accomplished because, I had gone through all of this, and, like, from where I started on day 1, wearing my hiking boots and Patagonia coat, to where I was day 14, wearing, Army fatigues and all of that. Spiritually, I was really proud, and I knew I had gotten something really good.
Yep.
I had captured a really good story, met some really great people, and I got to tell their story.
Yep.
Physically, there's a pretty drastic change too. I had trained for a couple of months to get ready for this, just to get in better shape. But even then, when I was there, I ended up losing 8 pounds while I was there. And I was not cutting back on food. It's just, it was so physical that I couldn't keep up with the calories I was burning. And right before graduation, they have a scale in their gym, and I decided to step on it because I could tell I had gone down a belt notch. Notch.
Belt notch.
Yeah, I'd gone down and stepped on the scale, and I was 8 pounds lighter from just 14 days ago. And again, nothing.
Wow.
Diet. I mean, sometimes you eat Cliff Bars out in the field, but I was going to breweries at night, and like I was eating pretty good, and it was just the impact of how hard that training was really stuck out. And it was like one of those where, like, I got to do the story right, because I put a lot on the line to tell the story. I lost weight, I got stronger, and, like, I don't know, it felt really good to get home that night. It was Valentine's Day, got to see my wife and daughter, and I don't know, it was a good feeling.
Well, it's another thing about you touched on it in the piece, is that even though it's really cold, you're moving a lot, and you're moving up grades, and there's a lot of sweat involved that you have to take into account in terms of your clothes. The sweat can freeze in your hair. I mean, how did that impact you? It
was so sweaty.
Which you don't think it would be when you're talking about being in the snowy mountains of Vermont.
And that's one of the big problems that I think, like Eiler ran into and other people ran into, is it's really hard to stay hydrated in the winter.
Yeah.
As opposed to the summer, you're drinking water, you need to.
Yeah.
But when you're wearing that Equix system, you're wearing those layers, it's pulling moisture out of your body. You're climbing, they're carrying 50-pound packs on their back. They need to be drinking a lot of water, and it's really hard. Also because the water freezes. There's a shot from day 8 where the sergeant major's water bottle was frozen. He had to punch it to try to be able to drink out of it. My water bottle was freezing up, so I was learning some tricks about how to wrap sweatshirts around my water bottle just so I could get a sip. We're all wearing rented gear for the most part, so by day 14 it smelled like a football locker room after a game. It was stinky and grimy in a way that you wouldn't imagine in the winter, because people are really, sweating a lot.
Yeah. Well, Jake, it's an awesome story, an awesome piece. And I mean, the story behind the story, like what it took to make it happen, to get those shots, to get up and down that terrain and get where you needed to be, just dealing with all of that, plus being focused on telling the stories of these people and following along in this fast-paced training environment and adjusting and adapting, being where you need to be, making those like quick decisions. It's just it is a great achievement, just from a production standpoint. But the story itself, I think it speaks for itself. It's compelling. There's action, there's humor, high stakes, awkwardness, tension. I mean, it's just got it all. And I really think that I learned a lot watching it. You learn about like the broader implications of like why they're training for it. I would highly recommend. Hopefully you've watched it if you're watching this. But I'm really excited to have it out and proud of it. And I'm just so glad you came back in one piece, and I'm glad the gear came back in one piece. But Jake Gabbard, senior producer here at Business Insider on the boot camp team. Congrats and great job.
Thank you.